Liz Koenig, and I'm going to be your presenter today for our CalPro online workshop called Developing ESL Students' Communication and Workforce Skills Through Cooperative Learning. So hopefully everybody can hear me. So can you just, in the little man with the raised hand at the top, just click agree if you're okay and you hear me and everything's fine. Right at the top where the guy's raising his hand. Okay, so Deborah's fine, David's fine. Hopefully you're all going to be able to hear me. And if you can't, or you're having any difficulty, you can just go in the chat pod and contact Barbara or Catherine, and they can help you out. Okay, great. So sounds like we're okay in terms of sound and everything. So we'll go ahead and get started. You can clear your status. Since we have a very large group, I won't ask you to introduce yourselves again. We've been introducing ourselves as we come into the room, and it's really great to have so many people from all over California. We've got Mira Costa, Mount Diablo, Mountain View, Los Angeles Unified School District, Moreno Valley, Hayward, San Francisco, Oxnard, Hayward, Petaluma. I've probably missed some, but we have a really diverse group of ESL instructors here today, so this is great. All right, now what we're going to do is talk about 3 different activities that you can find in the virtual workroom of CalPro. But before we do, let me just introduce myself. In case a couple of you I know, but in case I haven't met you before, my name is Liz Koenig, and I am currently working as the ESL Teacher Advisor for the Los Angeles Unified School District Division of Adult and Career Education. And in that position, I work as a teacher trainer, and I also work developing curriculum. From 2005 to 2008, I was the CalPro Professional Development Center Manager for the Los Angeles area, and that's when I really got to know CalPro and all of the modules and all the excellent teacher training resources that they have to offer. So I'm very excited to share this workshop today with you. What you're going to see today is our activities based on the workshop, CalPro workshop entitled Integrating and Contextualized Workforce Skills for ESL. And first, I'd just like you to raise your hand if you've taken this workshop. Maybe you've taken it face-to-face. It's been given all over California in face-to-face format. It's also been given as a webinar. I'm also giving this in another format called Community of Practice at Santa Barbara City College. So just curious to know how many of you have already had this workshop, the CalPro workshop. So far it looks like V. Meister and Sue-Ann McGovern have had this before. Great, good. Well, it's absolutely not necessary to have had this workshop. And if you have had it before, that's also great, because this is just going to be helpful to implementing the principles of the workshop, but it's not necessary to have had the workshop to get what we're going to talk about today. So you can go ahead and clear your status if you've raised your hand. Okay, and I'll just share the objective of today's webinar. The objective is that you're going to be able to use the CalPro virtual workroom to locate and apply cooperative activities to develop your students' communication skills that can transfer to the workplace. So that's our goal for today. And I just want to preface our webinar by pointing out, if you've been at all tuned in to what's going on at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, it really is, when it comes to adult education, the focus is becoming more and more on adult education and the workforce. And here's the goal of adult education from Expanding Horizons, where it explicitly says the goal of adult education for work is to provide individuals with the basic and workforce skills they need to be ready to enter and succeed in occupational training and or post-secondary education. This is the focus of adult ESL instruction more and more. And so it's important to be up on this development. And before we start, we kind of need to talk about, well, what are the workforce skills for ESL students, and what do we mean when we talk about workforce skills? So I'm just gonna, let's see if this is, okay, no, I'm gonna just have you, if you want, can you, in the chat pod, I don't know if we can make it a little bit bigger, I'll maximize it, and can you go ahead and type in, what do you think are the workforce skills that we're talking about? What are we talking about when we say workforce skills as they relate to ESL students? And by the way, there is a question about the PowerPoint slides being available to print, and Catherine said this recording of the session is in the community of practice after the event. And Catherine will describe more about the community of practice at the end of our session. So right now, just take a moment and tell me, what do you think are some of the workforce skills that we're talking about when we talk about workforce skills? What are we talking about when we talk about that as it relates to ESL students? And David says the ability to communicate effectively at work. Suanne says transferable skills that can be practiced in the classroom. Lolita, command of the English language, computer skills, people skills, clerical skills. Deborah, scan, soft skills, working in teams, active listening. Well, this is excellent. Go ahead and finish up what you're typing now, because I'm going to just let this, if you haven't started typing, just finish whatever you're typing now. But this is excellent. You all get the idea that when we talk about workforce skills, we're not talking about hard skills. When it comes to ESL, we're not talking about fixing the car tire or decorating a cake or whatever the skills are specific to a particular occupation. What we're talking about is exactly what you all are talking about, and those are what we have a lot of different names, but some of the names are transferable skills, soft skills, workforce skills, sometimes called portable skills, but this is basically what they are, and you all mentioned quite a few of them. They're the skills that students need, not just at work but in life, but they're particularly of use at work. And there are things like listening and understanding instructions, managing their time, monitoring their own performance. Of course, reading is important at work, especially when it comes to work documents. Being able to interact with others, teaching job duties to others, working in a team and solving problems. All of these things are very, very important at the workplace. And as a matter of fact, when employers in one study were polled and they asked, what's more important to you, hard skills or soft skills? And what's the percentage? And they said it's about 88% soft skills. They say, send us somebody who can listen and understand directions and get along with other people, and we'll teach them what they need to know for the job. And I see that Teresa has a raised hand. I don't know if you want to, maybe Catherine or Barbara can, I'm not sure what the raised hand is for, but go ahead and type in something if you have a question or you have a concern. All right, so those are the transferable skills that we're talking about. Now, cooperative learning, just if any of you are familiar with it, you know that it's kind of a learning or a teaching technique that's been around for a long time, in which students work together to attain goals that cannot be attained by working alone or competitively. And for a long time, it's been something that we like to use in ESL instruction because it's so wonderful for actually getting students to not learn language, but acquire language. Because peer interaction in natural setting, meaning natural ways, is ideal for students to really acquire second language skills. And so we in ESL have known for a long time that this is just a fabulous technique that we use to develop our students' language skills. But when we think about what cooperative learning really is and does, of course it develops communication skills, but it also develops thinking skills and social skills. And a lot of the social skills that it develops and helps students hone are things like taking turns, listening, paraphrasing, building consensus, teaching others. Now, where have we seen that before? Those are the soft skills. By and large, when we are doing cooperative learning with our students, they are developing all sorts of not only language skills, but wonderful collaborative social skills that absolutely apply and are useful at the workplace. Now, when we talk about cooperative learning, as a teacher trainer, sometimes I find that, some teachers think, well, it's just get in a group and work in a group, and that's cooperative learning. But that is not the case. Cooperative learning is not just having students work in a group or work in pairs. There are a couple of things that need to be in place in order for it to truly be cooperative learning. And these are the 4 components that a cooperative learning activity needs to have in order for it truly to be cooperative learning. And the acronym is PIES. And the first thing that the students, or that the activity will need to have, is positive interdependence. And that means that the activity needs to be structured in such a way that the students are working together to achieve a common goal. And that they can't just be concerned about their own performance, they have to be concerned about the performance of the whole group. And usually the activities like developing some sort of project or product, or maybe even giving them group rewards for something, these are the things that foster positive interdependence. The second thing that a cooperative learning activity needs to have is individual accountability. In other words, each student has to be accountable for his or her own work. It can't be possible for the one student to slack off, because in a true cooperative learning activity, everybody is accountable, and it won't be successful if not everybody contributes. You'll see that in cooperative learning, often we account for that by giving students roles in a group, so everybody has a role to play, or giving them a specific task in the activity, and maybe everyone has a different task. The E is equal participation. So this is important in ESL, I think, because we want to give all students the opportunity to be active and interactive in the classroom, not just the outgoing ones, but everyone. And so we want to give the students, all of them, an opportunity to take part. And cooperative learning activities are structured in such a way that students, even those shy ones, the introverts, have an opportunity to make their contribution. And the way that we do that often in cooperative learning is by structuring the activity so people have to take turns, or you divide up the labor so that they all have a different thing to do in the group. And finally, simultaneous interaction. This is very crucial, in my opinion, for a language class, because if you believe, as I do, that students, in order to acquire language, need to be actively using the language and actively communicating as much as possible, cooperative learning is excellent for giving all opportunities, that all students the opportunity to be actively engaged in communication all at the same time. In other words, in a traditional classroom, for example, where the teacher's doing 80% of the talking and the students are mostly listening, and the teacher's calling on the students, they raise their hand and the teacher calls on one student to answer a question, that's probably one of the most inefficient models when it comes to ESL instruction, because in a class of 30 students, if you do the math, in a 50-minute class, each student has an average of about 20 seconds of active participation in the class, and that's certainly not enough to be successful in a language class. So students are more engaged when someone is speaking directly to them, and that's what's great about cooperative learning, is because that's exactly what happens. They are either talking to someone or listening to someone almost all of the time. Now, that's what's great about cooperative learning, and I'm going to go over some cooperative learning activities that are included in the virtual workroom. And what I'm going to ask you to do right now, and hopefully this is going to appear right now, is, and I don't know if maybe Barb or Catherine can help me. I have a poll, and I just tried to bring it up and it didn't come up, and it should be a poll about the cooperative learning activities, and I want to know which ones have you used. And it might be behind this screen, so I don't know how to get it from behind this screen. But if we can get it up, I'm going to ask you, which of these cooperative learning activities have you used in your classroom? And we've got corners, and then I don't know if you can make it a little bigger, because I think there's more than what I'm seeing. I only see 3, and I think there's 4 of them. So I think I can make it bigger. Okay, I'm just made it bigger, and then we've got a question there. Okay, so if you can just, does everybody see the poll in front of you, or do I have to maybe click prepare? Oh, I don't know. Okay, you should be, okay, I see some results are coming in now, so you should be able to put in a little, I guess maybe you can only put 1. Yeah, unfortunately you can only choose 1. It should have been so you could choose any of them, but just choose one that you've used, that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to just go ahead and broadcast what we've got here. Okay, so we've got a lot of people have used conversation mixers, group projects. One person has used jigsaw reading, and that's good. I'm going to explain all of these. I'm going to explain all of these right now. So if you're not familiar with any of them, that's fine. If you are, that's fine too. Okay, and so Teresa has said, and I'm sorry, you could only check 1. I know you've probably used more than that, but again, that's fine. And Deborah has used all of them. Well, that's good, because you're going to see, like I said, if you've used them, great. If not, you're going to learn about them. And I think that the great thing about what I'm going to show you is that the instructions are very explicit. So if you haven't used it before, it'll be very easy for you. All right, so CalPro has something called the virtual workroom. And if you've ever been to the CalPro website, it's on the left side of the calproonline.org website. And when you click on that virtual workroom for adult educators, it'll come up and it'll look like this. And they have 3 of them at this point. One is for multi-level ESL, one is for workforce readiness, and one is for ABE reading instruction. And the one that we're concerned with today is the one for workforce readiness. And these virtual workrooms offer all sorts of resources, including some lessons, and that's what we're going to go over today. When you go there for the first time, you will need to set up an account and create an account. It's very easy to do, very self-explanatory and free. And then once you have an account, you will have to log in with your email and password every time you go into the virtual workroom. And then once you're in the virtual workroom, you can click where it says ESL instruction, because they do have workforce readiness for ABE and ASE, and they have other materials. But for what we're going to talk about today are some lessons that specifically relate to this. And so you would click on the right side where it says ESL instruction. And when you do, you're going to get something that looks like this. And there will be a list of all sorts of lessons There's 11 sets of instructional materials that you can use. They're at all levels, from beginning to advanced. Some of the activities are more for beginning students, some of them are for more advanced students, but they're all wonderful activities already done, all ready for you to just download and use in your own classroom. All right, so that's where the activities are. They will have a summary and then all the instructional materials. So the first one that we're going to look at today is called Choosing the Best Applicant. And this happens to be a jigsaw reading, and several of you are familiar with that. In a jigsaw reading, it's a true cooperative learning activity because the students all have a little different piece to read, and they're all responsible for a little different piece of information. They read it and then they go back to their groups and they summarize the information from the reading to contribute to a cooperative group task. So that's what it is. In the virtual workroom, when you click on that activity that I just showed you, the one that says Choose the Best Applicant, this is what you see. This is actually just the top part of what you see. It's a complete lesson plan. It will tell you what skills are used and what kind of activity. And then where it says Technique Jigsaw Reading, each of those bullet points is a step-by-step instruction on how to do this activity. So in this case, this activity is an activity that the students are going to be asked to choose a front desk clerk for a hotel, for the Orchid Hotel. Okay, so before they do this activity and before we do the activity, I'm going to kind of have you do what the students have to do, which is just brainstorm in the chat pod if you can. What are some technical skills that you would need if you're going to be a hotel desk clerk? And you could just type those in the chat pod. And by technical, I mean the hard skills, the skills that wouldn't transfer to another job, like the technical things that they have to okay. Okay, so some people are giving us some ideas. Typing, computers, a multi-line phone, yes, computer skills, absolutely. Data input, using the phone, obviously being able to, send the calls to the different rooms and kind of be like able to work with the switchboard there. Okay, good. So mostly phone and computer skills are what we're coming up with for that. Now let's talk about what are the personal skills that a hotel desk clerk would need to have in order to be successful at that job. Not necessarily the hard skills, but the skills, the personal soft skills that they would need to have to be a really good hotel desk clerk. Friendliness, Teresa says, absolutely good with people. Effective communication is absolutely crucial. Congenial and patient. I think patient is truly important. I've been in a lot of hotels lately, and I think that's true. Tactful, yes, absolutely. Politeness, friendly, effective communication, and so on. All right, so we're getting the idea. Teamwork and negotiation, yes. All right, informative. Yeah, you've got to be able to tell people, give people information, and I think you have to have the patience to kind of give the same information again and again and again. Problem solver, yes. Okay, so you could see, especially for this job, it's actually the soft skills that are way more important than any of the technical skills, and how the people skills are really important. All right, now what we're going to do is more or less somewhat simulate what might happen in the classroom. Not exactly, but the same idea in the fact that we're going to divide up, and each of you is going to read about one of 3 candidates. You won't read about all of them. You're only going to read about one. And then in the chat pod at the bottom, you're going to type in the technical skills that that candidate has and the personal skills that that candidate has. So let me show you what that's going to look like right now. Okay. Oh, whoops. I got to find it now. I think it's here. Okay, here it is. Yes. All right. Now, if your first name begins with A to I, if your first name starts with A to I, you're going to read the first chat pod, which is about Annabelle. And you're going to read about Annabelle and then type in the chat pod under Annabelle and show, or describe the technical and personal skills that she has. If your first name is J to R, you're going to read about Evan Moreno, which is the middle chat pod. Read about him and then do your brainstorm at the bottom of his technical and personal skills. And if your first name starts with S to Z, you'll read about Joy, and then you will type her skills at the bottom. And you shouldn't be reading anybody else's, only your own. So go ahead and read about your candidate, and then with the people in your group, just kind of talk about what are the personal skills they have and the technical skills they have. Okay, so now while people are typing, I'm going to just start summarizing for Annabelle. And so Annabelle, she makes signs and makes the schedule. She uses the cash register, so that will be one of her technical skills. Leadership and training others would probably be one of the personal skills. Communication skills, polite and helpful. Okay, good. Making the weekly schedule would probably be one of her technical skills. The cash register would be her technical skills, and so on. So bottom line, she's polite, helpful, excellent communicator, and can teach others and shows initiative. So those are her personal skills, and she can use the cash register and make the schedule and train people. All right, then for Evan, his soft skills are that he's friendly, personable, trustworthy, responsible, hardworking, motivated. Wow, he sounds great. Efficient. And then Joanne mentions his technical skills. He handles money and he can stand for long periods of time. I don't know if that's a technical skill, but that's definitely a skill you need. He can fix appliances, use a cash register, count money. Again, he fixes appliances. Okay, so that would be a hard skill, technical skill. His personal skills: quick to help, responsible, good sense of humor, trustworthy. Okay, good. All right. Oh, whoops, Teresa put it in the wrong place. So maybe I was reading something for, I don't know if I was reading for Joanne or for Joy or for someone else, but that's okay. So Sue-Ann has started the conversation about Joy, and Joy comes on time, interacts with others, listens, manages her time, works independently. Those are all her personal skills. And then Terry gives us her technical skills: computer, internet, phone, technical skills, and so on. All right, so you get the idea. Now, what's going to happen in the ESL classroom is a little bit different. We're online, so obviously I couldn't quite simulate the way it's going to work in your classroom. But the way it would work in your classroom is that you would put students in groups of 3, and they would number off 1 to 3 in their group. and then all the ones would go off together and maybe they would read about Annabelle, and all the twos would go off together and they would read about Evan, and all the threes would go off together and they're going to read about Joy. And they're first working in expert groups. They can be reading together, getting the information, collaborating together to get the answers about those two questions. Then when everybody's ready and confident, they go back to their original group, where now they are the expert on one of the candidates. And the other people in the group don't know anything about the other candidates because they haven't read about them. So this is why it's such a great cooperative learning activity, because there truly is positive interdependence. They need each other to finish the activity. There is a worksheet that accompanies this activity. So when they go back to their group, they're basically filling out this grid. And person number 1 will talk about Annabelle and her personal characteristics and her technical skills. And the other person 1 and 2, or 2 and 3 in the group will be listening and filling out the information. So by the end, when all 3 members of the group have spoken and shared the information, that chart should be complete. Okay, so that's the first part of the activity. Then the next part of the activity, once the students have all done this, and you can imagine how much talking and communication that's real will be going on, because they really will need to communicate this information. Then they can have a discussion as to who's the best candidate for the job and explain why. Now, when you set this up, what you can do is teach them some language, and this is also in a handout in this activity on the website. But you can give them language to teach them this very important skill of how do you bring in other people into a conversation. And here are some of the gambits that they might be able to learn and use. All right, so you can see that this is an activity that teaches the students a lot of things. A lot of things are going to come out of this activity. So go ahead and type in the chat pod, what do you think are some skills that are developed in this jigsaw reading activity after a student does an activity like this? And there are a lot of them. Okay, teamwork. Thanks, Teresa. Asking for clarification. Absolutely, Deborah. They're going to have to negotiate this themselves, so they will be asking each other, could you repeat that? What did you mean by that? Can you spell that? Critical listening, confidence, negotiation, consensus building, when they have to agree on the correct, or not the correct, but the consensus on who's going to be the person that they would hire. And it's not immediately evident who it would be, so there will have to be some discussion. Giving feedback to each other, communication and encouragement, effective communication, polite disagreement, that's also very important. That happens in life, that happens at work. We have to sometimes politely disagree with people. Multitasking. Okay, so you can see that this is an activity that just brings out all sorts of skills, all sorts of language, and it's a really great activity to try if you can in your classroom. All right, I want to get to the next one. Another one, and there's just so many of them in this workroom, but another one that I'll briefly describe is a bar graph lesson. In this bar graph lesson, when you click on it, it looks like this. And basically, students are going to first do a corners activity where you will post around the room 4 to 6 signs that represent their jobs and their life roles. So it could be homemaker, office worker, retiree, and the student has to go and walk to the sign that represents their job or their life role. And then once they're there, that's how you formed a group. Okay, so that's the corners, and a lot of you have used that before. And then once they're in the group, now comes the graphing part. Okay, so one student will count how many people are in the group, and then they make a sentence. There are 5 office workers, for example, and then you write it on the board, as the teacher, you'll write that 5 office workers, and then you show them how to chart the information on a graph on the board. Obviously, now this is what it might look like. You know, this is something that you would show them on the board. Obviously, for this would be something for a very beginning level class where it really would be something where reading a graph or a chart would be a skill that they would need explicit instruction on. But it could also be used in a more advanced class, and I don't think it would be so much about explicitly teaching them how to read this graph, but it could be about the language to describe the graph, which can be very sophisticated grammatically. So if you say, the majority of students work in the medical field, or several of our students work in the medical field, or statistics show that most of our students, you can teach them those kinds of phrases which are more sophisticated, and students very often have a lot of difficulty with because they're complicated. So for a more advanced class, it could be more about the language to express this rather than the skill itself of reading the graph or the chart. But at any rate, the students are going to read the bar graph together, and you'll help them kind of process it. They copy it onto their own paper, and there is a bar graph paper that looks like this that's provided in the lesson. And then there is also the recommendation that they kind of process the bar graph together in pairs, reading it together and making sentences about it. And then it says that you want to summarize the lesson. Today you learned about the jobs of students in our class, and you learned to read a bar graph, and now you can say, I can read a bar graph. One of the tenets or the principles of this workplace workshop that 2 of you attended, not everybody, but one of the things, the themes that goes throughout the workshop is that you always want to tell the students, help give them the language for what they're learning so that they can say, I can do this, I can read a graph, I can cite statistics, I can do this. So you're giving them the language to articulate their skills. Okay, all right, now there is also a little worksheet that they can use to ask questions and work on this together. And again, I think this could be adapted to different levels. Now, I want you to think about how could you use this bar graph activity in your class with your level, and or what kinds of topics could you use to survey your students? In this case, in the example that I gave, we were surveying students about you know, their different work situations or their life roles, whether they were homemakers or you know, parents or whatever. What other topics could you use to survey students? If you have any ideas about that, go ahead and chat it, put it in the chat pod at the bottom. Okay, so this could be an introduction to a unit on employment. This would be a great way to get people interested in talking about the topic. That's a great suggestion. It could also be about homes, transportation, right? Who takes the bus, who walks, who rides their bike. It could be food, it could be goals. They go and survey each other about the goals, how they practice English. These are all great, great suggestions. Maybe the clothes they like, the food they eat, the exercise they do, how often they help their children with homework. That would be an excellent one for a CBET class or a family literacy class. Oh, and if you have a very advanced class, I like Joanne's idea of getting a Craigslist and job openings and make a graph to reflect what are the openings in our area. You guys have excellent ideas. These are great ideas. So now I want to kind of give you a point that's brought out in the original workshop, and one that I think is important for you to know about, and that is contextualized instruction. And you'll hear a lot about that right now. And what that basically means is, when it comes to workforce, is that we need to help students develop the skills and knowledge and attitudes drawn from the context in which they will be used, using real-life materials and situations from that context. So when it comes to workplace, getting students, ESL students in particular, prepared for the workplace, one of the things that we can do is, whatever we're teaching, even if we're doing a unit on clothing, or we're doing a unit on, shopping, we can help the students prepare for the workplace by helping put what they've learned in the context of the workplace. And let me talk how that might work with what we've just talked about. In this activity that they just did, they learned how to read a chart, especially if they're beginning level. They may have really learned the skill of reading a chart or a graph. And then you can kind of help students make the connection that, at work, there are often charts and graphs that you have to read. So this is directly transferable to work, and we can help put that in that context by talking about the graphs and the charts that they have to use at work. And here's an example of maybe a chart that might be a real workforce document. In this case, it's an employee evaluation chart, and that is once they've learned how to read a chart, they might be able to read a real employee evaluation chart. Okay, so now what I'm going to ask you to do again in the chat pod is think about, let's say you've taught your students about how to read a graph and how to read a chart, and you would really like to make the connection with your students that this is a skill that you could use at work. And the way you're going to do it is maybe show them some authentic documents that are from work that would include reading a bar graph or a chart. So what are some kinds of documents that you would read at work in real life that might be in a bar graph or in a chart form? Because these are the types of things that we might want to bring in and show our students to help make that explicit connection from what they're learning with us to the workplace. So Christy points out monthly sales. Yeah, if it's a business situation, absolutely, you're going to see graphs and for the sales. And Deborah points out work schedules. Yeah, my work schedule is absolutely in a chart format every week. Statistics, job duties, often at work the job duties will be in a chart form. For sure, job schedules. Temperatures in a lab. So if someone is a nurse or working in the medical field, it's very possible that they might have to, plot out or chart a patient's temperature in a graph form. Servicing a car, if it's a mechanic, they might have to have a chart. Yeah, for sure, to look at, what kind of car is it, and then read across the chart to find out what is the, part or service recommendation for that kind of car. Pay stub might be in a graph form, and so on. You all get the idea. I think you're getting the idea here that that's one of the things that we want to do when we prepare our students for work, is to help make the connection explicit. What we're doing in the class has application for them in the workplace. All right, now, are you ready for the last activity? That was the bar graph activity. I'm going to show you one more. This is a fun one. This is the conversation card mixer. And I think a lot of you have already done an activity like this. And these are just such great activities. It's one of my favorites to do an activity like this because it just gets people up and moving and talking and interacting and interested, and it's just one of those tried and true activities. For those of you who are not familiar with this kind of activity, I'll briefly explain. In this case, we've got, I think in the activity, I think they have about 16 maybe, or maybe it's 20 questions. They all happen to have something to do with work. And they're in this little grid form, like, do you like to go out for lunch or bring home lunch from home? Do you like to work alone or with other people? Do you like to send email messages or write letters at work? Do you like to find information on the internet? And so on. So these are work-related questions. And what you would need to do for a conversation mixer is you will need to, well, I'm going to keep explaining this. What you would need to do is put these questions on a card. I think a card works best because it's a little bit more durable. One way that I like to do it is just to print these questions on labels and then just stick the label on an index card, and that way they're there. But you could also, cut them and paste them on a card, or just hand copy the questions onto index cards. Whatever works for you, but you're going to want to have one question on an index card, one different question for every student in your class. So if you have 30 students, you're going to want 30 cards. I think in this activity they have about maybe 20 questions or so, and it's okay if some of them are repeated. That's okay. Each student will get a conversation card. And then you model for the students. Have one student come up and model with you to show the students that what they do is, I ask a question from my card. So if I would ask my partner, for example, do you like to go out for lunch or bring lunch from home? And then my partner would answer, I like to go out for lunch. And then he would ask his question, do you like to work alone or with other people? And then I would answer, we trade cards, and then you go find a new partner. So when this is working, it's like a mingle or a mixer, and people are mingling and asking each other questions. And this is explained step by step in the activity. So if this is something that you're getting a little lost, don't worry. When you go in the workroom, it's explained very explicitly step by step. But you also, in this activity, are going to teach them the language that they need to start and end a conversation politely. So in other words, not that you just go up to someone and ask a question, but they have to say something like, hi, can I ask you something? And then they ask the question. And then when the conversation's over, you teach them how to end it in a polite way by saying, oh, I've got to go now. It was nice talking to you. And then they exchange the cards. So this is really important, of course, in life and in work. To be able to start a conversation and end a conversation politely is a hugely important skill to have. In the virtual workroom, you will see that they have all sorts of phrases that you can use to teach your students. So to start the conversation, you could teach your students, excuse me, can I talk to you for a minute? Or can I ask you something? Can I talk to you for a minute? And then teach them how to end the conversation. I'd love to continue this conversation, but, oh, I'm sorry, I think I should be going. So you're going to teach that to them as well. All right. Now, and I'm going to just read Deborah's comment in the chat bot. If you use two different colors, they have to keep changing colors, which encourages them moving around the classroom. Okay, good idea. Using different color cards means they have to go and find someone with a different color, means they're not just going to stand up and just stand there. They have to move. That's a great idea, Deborah. Thanks for sharing that. All right. All right, there's more explanation of the process. It is a good idea to warn students a few minutes before it's going to be over, because once this activity gets going, believe me, it's going to be a buzz. Your classroom is going to be just buzzing with talking and laughing, and it's hard then to get them to stop. So you can give them a warning, 2 minutes, wrap up, and then after, it's nice to always just wrap up and bring some closure to the activity and have them, talk about what they've talked about. All right. Now you might have noticed that some of the conversational phrases might be a little high for your level. So what would be some that would be appropriate for your level? If your first name is A to L, you can think of some conversational phrases that you could use to start a conversation or end a conversation? Are there any other conversational phrases that you might be able to include in an activity like this? And if your first name is M to Z, why don't you go ahead and think about what are some other conversation questions besides the ones that I mentioned, maybe even simpler language that you could include in an activity like this. And this activity, the conversation questions, are related to work. So what are some other work-related conversation questions that you might include in an activity like this? And see, people are typing away. So I'm going to maybe see what happens if I maximize this. Okay, so hi, can I ask you something? Or I'd like to ask you a question. Oh, now this is a good one, how to compliment people, because that's very often how we get a conversation started. That's a good one. Hey, I really like your sweater. Thanks, David. That's a good suggestion. And then to end the conversation, well, I have to go now. See you later. And then now talking about a question that you might ask. Do you like working days or evenings? I like yours, Lolita. That's pretty, I think, pretty common. You're going to hear people say, hey, do you have a sec? That's pretty informal, but they're definitely going to hear that, and I think they'll appreciate, they've probably heard it, and they'll like to know that little phrase. More formal, Christy, it's nice to meet you, a pleasure to meet you, great to talk to you. And then for clarification, did you say, or you said such and such, is that right? And then Anna, thanks for your time. And then talking again about questions that you could include in an activity. Do you like to work indoors or outdoors? Do you prefer formal or casual corporate culture? I like that question. That's a good one. Oh, Christy, I also teach students to shake hands and look in the eye. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up, because we do have to, I think, even explicitly teach that as well, that in a lot of cultures eye contact is considered rude or impolite, and students do need to understand and practice what for them sometimes is very, very uncomfortable, but they do have to practice looking someone in the eye and not a wimpy handshake, and also not a too strong handshake, not the vice grip, but the, you know, nice and firm but not too firm. Okay, then good. You know, I think students do appreciate, Joanne, some of those casual phrases that, you know, are very informal, but they hear them and they'll come up to you and say, what does this mean, gotta run? So I think this gives you an opportunity to talk about these types of things in a class. These types of things can come up and we can have that conversation with the students. It gets them out of the book, it gets them talking about real life and real language and real things that they hear in life. And then, you know, gotta run and so on. Okay, good job. We've got one more person typing, a couple more people typing, so I'll wait for their comments, but I think we'll move on after this last comments. And then for beginning low, Helen proposes, yeah, just keep it really simple. Hi, I'm Liz. Nice to meet you. Let's, you know, especially for beginning students, we don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of language. We can give them just something really simple to kind of gain control over. Obviously, especially with these phrases to end a conversation and start a conversation, it would not be your goal to teach them as many as possible. I think it's more of a goal to teach them one or two that they could really use and that would really be useful to them. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about what are some of the conversation skills that students would develop in this conversation mixer activity. And then I don't know what happened to that chat pod that we used to have. Did I do something to it, Catherine or Barbara? I don't know what happened to it. If we can get our chat pod back. I know they're looking for it. I don't know where it is. But when we get our chat pod back, let's quickly talk about what are some transferable skills that the students would develop in an activity like this. Okay, Catherine's just going back to that other chatbot that we had going there. I guess I somehow hid it from everybody, so now it's back. All right, there it is. Okay, thank you. So now, what are some transferable skills that they're going to develop in this activity when they are learning how to start and end a conversation? Social confidence, yes. Customer service, absolutely. That hotel clerk is going to need to know how to do this. Meeting and greeting people, making small talk. I think, yeah, all of that. Social skills, assertiveness. This is huge to build confidence. Just to know these are the phrases that you'll use gives the students so much confidence. Because I know it just sometimes if you don't know exactly what you're supposed to say, it's just such an unsettling feeling, and it can give them so much more confidence if they have a lesson like this where they really get the information about how to negotiate these types of social interactions and being more comfortable and looking into someone's eyes. Like I said, I'm sure you've had this experience too. It's hard when you come from a culture where that's not part of what you do. And it's nice to be in a classroom like an ESL classroom where you can really get the opportunity to practice that. I think they do need to practice it. And when they report back, Sue-Ann points out they're going to be summarizing, which is always so very important for students to know how to do, and something they should be working on a lot at all times. We've still got a couple of more people typing. I'll let them type and then we'll move on to the next idea, but I think we're all getting the idea. Practice in approaching a stranger, yeah. Body language, that's excellent. Yes, Angelica, because that could also be another conversation of, how close do we stand to someone? What kind of, do we touch them? Is that polite? How do we shake hands? All of that is important and can come out in an activity like this. How to confront their supervisors in a polite and appropriate manner. Yeah, so in an activity like this, we can talk about, how do you start a conversation with someone who's your supervisor, your superior. And I think the students are always very interested in knowing, how do I do that in a very polite way, especially some students who come from cultures where being polite and formal is so important. They really want to know what's the right way to do this, so I'm very polite and inoffensive and doing it the right way. All right, so excellent suggestions, everyone. Good job. Now I'm going to ask you, we've talked about 3 activities from the virtual workroom, which I hope at this point you're very excited to use and thinking, I can't wait to get in there and use it. So now I'm going to ask you, which activity will you use? And I'm hoping you can all see it. I don't know, maybe not. Is it open? I hope you can all see it. So you will only be able to vote for one, but which one do you think you're most likely to use in your class? Which one are you most excited about using right now? Is it the jigsaw reading, the bar graph, the conversation mixer, or maybe something else? I don't know. Okay, I'll give you just a few more seconds, but I think we've got the results maybe. All right, and it looks like most people, I think you can see it, I hope you can see it, but if you can't, the one that most of you are excited about is the conversation mixer. A couple people, 2 people want to use the jigsaw reading, and 4 people are interested in the bar graph. Well, they're all excellent. I can speak from experience. I've used all of these, and they're all excellent, excellent, excellent activities which I'm sure you're going to find to be very useful and successful in your classroom. Now, I want to, before we move on to the next topic, offer you the opportunity to ask any question before, in a moment I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Green. But if there's any question that you'd like to ask before I do that, go ahead and type in your question. And then Teresa's asking about the PowerPoint. And I think Catherine, when I turn it over to Catherine, she can say that again because it is going to be in the community of practice, which is what we're going to talk about next. So you will have access in the recording and in the COP, the community of practice, which Catherine is going to talk about in just a moment. All right, so while people are typing, I'll just kind of preface this. I think it's really wonderful what CalPro is offering. You know, all of these activities are excellent, and you just saw 3 of them. There's actually 11 of them. I can tell you they're all excellent and all something you can very easily use in your classroom on Monday. And what's really great that what Catherine is about to talk about is this community of practice. So now that, you know, hopefully you're excited, you're going to start doing this and implementing this. But what often happens is you go and you go to a webinar, you go to a workshop, and you're all excited about using something, and then either you forget about it, or you try to do it and you forget something, or you have a question, or maybe you implement it and it's completely awesome and you want to just shout it from the rooftops how great it was, or you've come up with a great way to do it yourself and you want to share it with other people, but there's nowhere to share it. Well, in this community of practice, we can keep the conversation going and we can keep talking about it and have a place to continue the conversation and sharing on the topic if you're interested. All right, so I'm going to just go through the questions before, oops, I don't know, I don't think I did that. Okay, because there were some questions that people had asked and I was just going to go through them. Okay, so I think great overview. Okay, I don't think anybody had any specific questions that I can see that I should answer, and if I'm mistaken, we'll get to them later, but right now I'll turn it over to Catherine Green, who's going to talk to you about the community of practice.
Hey everyone, this is Catherine. I wanted to make sure I'm audible since the other mic was not working. So just somebody say yes in the chat pod if you can hear me okay. Okay, great, thanks. So so I think Liz already did a tremendous job and a sell job for the virtual workroom. I'd like to acknowledge that the ESL activities, the 11 ESL activities that are found there were all created by 2 seasoned practitioners we've had the pleasure of working with them in the past. One is Rana Meiji and the other is Donna Price. The virtual workroom activities for ESL students were made by this 2, and then as Liz pointed out, we also have some materials for ABE and ASE instructors that were made by other seasoned practitioners. So I really hope you will log into that. As she mentioned, we have 2 other virtual workrooms which may be of interest to you as well. But I'm going to try to share my desktop and give you just a sort of sneak preview of the community of practice. It's a web page that looks like this. And so let me just stop sharing this for a moment and go to share my my screen, and then it will take me a moment to get there. So just a minute, please. Okay. And I've now taken over the other computer, so I can't quite see what you can see. So just 1 minute, and I I will navigate us there. And Barbara, I'm going to rely on you to tell me in the chat pod that I can see on the other one when CalPRO's website is visible. Okay, great, thanks. The virtual workroom, as she mentioned, is here, but I wanted to let you know that there's also links in the two different paired resources. There's links to each other. So you can link to the electronic community of practice from CalPRO's website, and from the ECOP you can get back to CalPRO's website. So they go, in a sense, back and forth. So if you haven't signed up for this, I'd encourage you to do so. When it comes up in a moment here, if you're not a member, you would click Join this group and answer 3 simple questions. I am a member, and so I'm going to hopefully, under pressure, remember my login and show you how this works. So just a moment, please, while we need a virtual drum roll here. It's waiting. So inside the ECOP, which is open to all the folks who've been in this webinar or were eligible for this webinar, you'll find a number of things, including a variety of other practitioners to network with, discussion forums to engage with them, a webinars page, which I'll navigate to in a moment here, that has a list of past and upcoming webinars. And so I realize I might be scrolling a little too quickly, or the image might be small. You can probably find a full screen button in the upper right corner of the share pod to make it bigger. So for example, here is today's webinar that Liz has done, and the evaluation for participants who attended this webinar, the evaluation is here. When this is done, I will edit and add in the recording link, so that will be there, and then there'll be a link to the discussion forum. So every past ECOP webinar gets listed here, so this becomes an archive of past recordings and associated materials and discussions, and then upcoming ones are here as well. So you'll see that 2 weeks from today, Jamie Adelson Goldstein is going to be leading one on multi-level ESL instruction, specifically looking at how to develop students' problem-solving skills, which is one of those both workforce-related ones, useful on the job, useful in post-secondary, useful in life. So I hope you'll all sign up for that. And if you yourselves teach ABE or know teachers who do, I'd like to encourage you to take advantage of the webinar that's coming up in 2.5 weeks with an ACE instructor, Guillermo Verdin, and interviewed by another ACE ABE instructor, Jennifer Block, and you can pick their brains about best practices in teaching ABE reading in particular. So that's a little bit about the webinars page. In the ECOP, there are discussion forums I mentioned. We also have a newsletter. There's a filing cabinet which allow you to share resources with each other. You can network with different members. I don't know if this will quite come up quickly enough, but anyway, various ways to sort it and see who's on. I think currently there are about 40 people, and we don't yet have any particular subgroups, and then the ECOP webinars page that I mentioned. So again, you can get to this by going to the link that's in the chat pod. You can sign up for the webinars that are also listed through the CalPRO event calendar, and there are direct links to register for them in the chat pod. And then finally the virtual workroom, which has not only these materials by Rana and Donna, it also has a host of additional resources and research on this subject, and could also help administrators who are interested in establishing career pathways programs in their schools. for sort of basic infrastructure. So I see we're just a little bit over time. Let me stop talking and welcome anybody who has questions to feel free to type them in the chat pod. Otherwise, I'd like to give a hearty thank you and round of applause to our presenter, Liz Koenig. She's done an excellent job. Thank you so much, Liz. And thank all of you for coming out on a Friday afternoon to take advantage of this resource. I hope you'll all join the ECOP and continue the conversation and continue the learning there. Thank you, Barbara, for your technical support, and we hope to see you again soon. If any of you are going to the CCAE State Conference that is next week in Fresno, please visit us at the CalPro booth. We'll be there, and we'll also be doing a few presentations. And if anyone has any other questions related to this webinar or the things that I've shared or CalPro's online program that I run, please email me. My email